Okay, well, we'll get started. So are there any particular tools that you're interested in? Because we can focus more time on this. There's so many tools, and we've tried to select ones that, well, actually, Rebecca and I originally put this together, and I've expanded it a little bit since then. And it was a list of tools that I was familiar with and tools that I've tried. There are so many tools out there, but this is a good starting point. And we've tried to focus on tools that are either free or that are relatively inexpensive. You know, some of them only cost a few dollars a year. And most of them are free, or at least for people who are working at SUNY Oswego. Are there any particular areas you'd like to focus on? Bill or Jackie? You're muted, Bill. You're still muted.
There, that's better. Now you can hear me. I remember giving a lecture there when we first moved over to online, and my students let me go on for about 5 minutes before they told me I wasn't. Yeah. I was going to say
with Zoom is it does it will give you a warning now.
Some of the stuff you can do with YouTube would interest me.
Okay. And Jackie, are there any particular things?
I think Jackie's muted also.
And she may have stepped away. Okay, well, I'll give you a broad overview, and then we can talk more about any specific tool, so we can come back to YouTube. Audio recording is nice if you want to have students do podcasts or something like that, or turn in some sort of audio project. Audacity is an editing program that's available on Windows and Mac operating systems. And I think there's a Chrome version of it as well that had most of the features of a full-featured editing program. It's not quite as flexible as some of the ones that cost $500 or $600 or more per year, but it has most of them. And it's led to this dramatic expansion in the music recording industry, where people no longer have to buy studio time. They just need microphones and a computer, and you can do it on relatively cheap, inexpensive computers. So it's made music much more open. So if you're doing anything where students might be recording or editing music or creating podcasts, it's a great program. And it's pretty easy to learn. Adobe Audition is something we have access to from the campus, but it's a lot more expensive. And there's so many mobile apps on all platforms. We didn't even attempt to list them, except I suppose GarageBand is commonly used for people editing audio who happen to have iOS devices. But there's many, many others out there. Back channel apps, we won't go through each of them, but back channel apps are kind of nice if you're at a conference, it's really helpful, where you can have side discussions while there's some type of presentations going on. Most conferences will have a Twitter tag, for example, which is used to allow people to discuss things that are going on. And I've been at lots of conferences where people will post something interesting about what's happening in one session. And I've seen people, including myself at times, leave if we were in the back, leave one session and go to another one where there was something that was clearly much more engaging or interesting or more relevant to me. But it also leads to some nice sharing, so that if the presenter raises a point and then someone said, well, are there any studies that support that? You'll often see people posting that in. The same sort of thing can be done in the classroom. You know, if you use some form of back channel app, students could ask questions that either you could answer or someone in the class. If you have a large class, you could get some nice back discussions going where questions can come in and so forth. Built into Google Slides, if you turn on the Q&A feature, students can post questions and other people can respond to them. And then you can answer those questions during that, you know, if you're giving some type of a lecture, for example. But there's a lot of tools for that. Padlet is sometimes used, although that's often used as just a simple whiteboard. And there's a free program called Backchannel, which is designed explicitly to allow these back discussions. And it lets everyone engage with a discussion, and especially in large classes where it might be hard to have everyone raise their hand and say something. Simply the Zoom chat when we've been remote has been a good way to have some really productive discussions that tie into what's being discussed by whoever happens to be presenting at the time. There's a lot of good tools out there. All learning management systems, both the crappy ones in Blackboard and the better ones that we'll have when we move to Desire to Learn, have some forms of blogs and journals. Blogs are things that are shared more broadly, outside of, well, or shared at the very least with everyone in the class. Journals are generally something that only the student and the instructor can see. And using a blog or a journal is a good way to encourage students to engage in metacognitive practice, to reflect on the learning, to reflect on what they're doing, to reflect on the learning process and the process of discovery that's taking place in the class. Now, the ones built into learning management systems tend not to be terribly good, but there's some really good free platforms out there. One of which is built into Google, which is Blogger. Students can create blogs that could be kept within the class, or they could be shared more publicly using the Blogger tool. And it's a very easy program to use. WordPress is by far the most common blogging platform out there, and students can get a free account, create their own page, or if you want to, we do have this the SUNY Create project where you could host your own instance of WordPress and give student accounts or author accounts on your WordPress instance to all of your students, and then you have the full access to the full set of tools and not those that are provided with the free public account. So you can install various plugins and you can make it much more flexible if you want to. But again, students can just create their own account, or you could create a class account. And again, we do have free access to that, where basically you have full control over the WordPress server, which is something that we didn't have until recently. Padlet is another tool that people will often use for blogs and journaling. I haven't done very much with Padlet, but it's pretty widely used, particularly in high schools, but also in many college classes. In terms of captioning, this has been something covered in lots of workshops now. Most programs now have built-in captioning that you can enable, certainly all the video recording ones that we work with here. YouTube captioning was the first one that did free captioning. Otter.ai is free for a certain amount of captioning each year. That's something I actually have a paid account for that. We use it for the podcast. One of the problems with YouTube captioning is that it will not do punctuation. So you get this long stream of words, so there's no capitalized words, there's no punctuation, there's no periods, and it's a lot of work converting those into sentences if you want to edit it. Otter.ai uses an artificial intelligence engine which gets progressively better and better all the time, and it will build in a sentence structure. And more often than not, it's accurate. It's become increasingly accurate. And in fact, that's what's used for the Zoom captioning. The auto captions that you see in Zoom now for the last year now are relying on Otter.ai because now Zoom has purchased the use of that for all of their live captioning. Google Slides also have live captioning. So if you're presenting using Google Slides, you can enable live captioning and everything you say will go through Google's live captioning feeder, which is actually better than the one built into YouTube, and it will do a bit more, and it tends to be a little bit more accurate, although they're both being updated all the time. Google Meet also has the same things for what used to be Google Hangouts and so forth. So there's a lot of good tools. Curation and social bookmarking is basically ways of keeping track of things that you discover out there on the web. And all of these tools allow you basically to find things on the web, to tag them so you can go back and find them again, and generally allow you to share them with other people, either with everyone or with a class group. A common use of this in a class is if you want students to go out and discover new information about some topic, you give them the topics and you send them out there, and then you ask them to use one of these curation tools to gather that and to share it with the class with appropriate tags. It's a good way of gathering information about a topic, and then at a later stage of their work, they could then build on that in some way. A simple form of that is just using Twitter with hashtags. There are many cases where people in in botany classes have sent students out in the field to take pictures of plants and to share them with the appropriate identification and images from the environment describing where they are found and so forth. Classes in urban archaeology have done similar things, having people go out and take pictures of the buildings and do write-ups about that. And that can all be gathered easily just by using a class hashtag in Twitter. Or again, any of those tools allow you to do that, where you can take pictures and then tag them and then share them using the platform. And each of them has somewhat different features, but this is a reasonably good list of the ones that are most commonly used for gathering information and sharing them so that you can go back and find them later, or that some of the people you're working with can go back and find them. There's a lot of good graphic programs out there, and we just listed the major ones because, again, since we do have Adobe products available to anyone with a campus license, all faculty at least can get it installed on their computers, and it is installed on all the computer labs for student use. You know, Adobe Photoshop is great if you're editing bitmap images. Adobe Illustrator is really good if you're working with vector graphics. And each of them has some capabilities in the other domain, but that's the primary areas. So Photoshop, if you're editing, you know, highly detailed photos or images, you know, that are basically have pixels in them, or Adobe Illustrator, if you have things that you want to be able to scale up to a poster size or scale down to a smaller size, it'll maintain the relative dimensions and keep all the lines, images, the circles, and other things really crisp at different scale. That's what vector graphics do. That instead of having the individual points, they have various constructs with, like they'll have the shape of a circle, and that will get bigger or smaller and maintain the same dimensions, and it'll look cleaner if you expand it or even if you contract it, because with bitmap images, you lose some things when you make them bigger. You end up with something that looks a little bit blockier. But each of them has some capabilities in the other domain. So it depends on what you're mostly working with. If you're mostly working with photos or, you know, pieces of art created in a bitmap program, Photoshop is the easiest. If you're working primarily with graphics that you want to use for publication, for print publication or different scales, Adobe Illustrator is probably the best. And Microsoft Paint D is a remarkably powerful program that will let you do a little bit of both of these things. And it's basically an outgrowth of the old Paint program. And all of them now also let you do some work with 3D objects. So you can render things for virtual reality frameworks, which is why Microsoft Paint 3D now has that 3D that additional suffix to it. And GIMP is a free program that emulates much of what's in Photoshop. And you can even set up the interface so that it looks similar. A lot of students have used that when they haven't had access to Photoshop. If you want to embed questions in video, we did a workshop on that. It didn't go quite so well because of some tech problems, but you can add questions into video stored in Panopto. You can get any videos out there using Edpuzzle, and you can have up to 20 videos at a time that have some embedded questions. PlayPosit is free for up to 100 learner attempts. Otherwise, you've got to pay about $144 a year. Edpuzzle is similarly priced if you want to use more than that. I know it's used a lot. Edpuzzle is used a lot in high schools because what people will do is they'll just activate a video and use it for a certain period of time in the class, and then they'll delete that one and replace it with another. So you can have 20 active, and you know, if you need more than that, you could just remove some of them and then come back and use them again later, because the videos are generally hosted on YouTube or some other platform. And all you're doing with Edpuzzle is you're embedding questions in them that you share with students. So when they're watching the video, it will get to a certain point, they're asked a question, and then you might allow them to do it again, and then it generates a score. And at many institutions, these are integrated into the learning management system. We haven't been able to get that done here because of the cost primarily, but Panopto does have that, but you can only embed each question you embed in a video becomes a separate gradebook entry. So if you want to put 5 questions in a particular video, for example, as I often do, you'd end up with 5 scores for that one video. And then if you have students in my classes, I generally have 30 to 70 videos, that would just blow up the gradebook into something incredibly messy. So I tend to work primarily with PlayPosit, but I have experimented with Edpuzzle, and I bought the PlayPosit license because it's the most flexible. So that one, that last one really isn't free unless you only have a really small class, or you're not going to use it for many videos. But again, you could use those for free use if you only had a limited number of videos, and you get all sorts of analytics and so forth on the amount of time that students spent engaging with the video and so on. There's so many tools available, and these keep growing regularly on collaboration. And we've had some of these for quite a while now. Certainly all the Google apps allow people to collaborate remotely from wherever they happen to be in the world. One of the first times I used this extensively was about 7 or 8 years in a COIL course, where I had students in my class working in a class with students in Mexico. And they just loved the fact that they could sit there at the same time, often while they were using, back then it was mostly Google Hangouts, later it was Zoom and so forth. But where they could sit there and talk and actually edit documents in real time together and show the changes to other people, and it's a really great tool for student collaboration. I've been using that in all my classes, well, nearly all of my classes for quite some time now. Students will often jointly work on projects and papers together in that, and it's good for them to learn those basic skills. There are group tools in Blackboard to help facilitate that, but I've always found Google to be a little more intuitive for simultaneous collaborative work. Zoom breakout rooms is really good for student collaborative work because all of our students do have Zoom accounts. And, even if if we lose that Zoom license at some point, if things get back to something closer to normal, and I suspect we'll probably be cutting down within the next couple of years on Zoom licenses. So we might not have them for students. Students can create their own, and you can have unlimited length Zoom sessions for one guest, or you're limited to, I think it's 20 or 30-minute sessions. But I know a lot of people, before we all got licenses, would just set up a meeting that would last for, I think it was 30 minutes. And then they'd simply create a new meeting that followed that immediately with the same URL. They just use their default room. So everyone would get booted out after 30 minutes, and then everyone would go right back in and they'd have another 30 minutes of meeting time. I know a few colleagues who did that back when I was working with them on other SUNY projects. But then usually we just use my Zoom room because I've had a paid one for about 6 years or so now. Trello is another good thing for project organization that's used in some classes where there's long-term projects. It's for project management. Asana is another one. Basecamp is something similar. I haven't actually worked with that, but I think Rebecca had, which is how that got in there. If you want to have students create infographics, which is a fun way of putting some concepts together, to demonstrate some basic knowledge, Adobe Spark is a free program that runs on pretty much all platforms. It's often used on iPads, Android tablets, or on smartphones, but there are versions of it that work on Chromebooks and laptops as well. Canva is a great tool for creating presentations, images, charts. It has a lot of free things built into it. You can pay more for some of the tools, but the basic set of free tools is really good. It has tools for creating posters, for creating poster presentations, for creating slides, for creating backgrounds, for creating infographics, and a whole host of other things. Easily has some similar features. I haven't really played with that very much. Google Charts has some pretty decent basic chart capabilities and drawing tools that's integrated with everything else. Infogram and PictoChart also have similar tools, but the ones listed first are probably Adobe Spark, Canva, and Google Charts are the ones that I've seen being used the most. There's a lot of interactive whiteboards out there, but by far the most commonly used ones are Jamboard, Padlet, and Miro. Jamboard is the simplest. It's built into the Google suite of tools. And all you have to do if you get to that little display where you have that grid of the 9 dots, that little matrix, click on it, scroll way down to the bottom. There's a Jamboard. You can make it public and editable by anyone, share the link, and then all of your students can go in and post post sticky notes on a page and change your color and move them around. It's a wonderful tool, and we've used that for lots of past workshops. But it's a good way of getting some quick feedback from students, and by default, it's anonymous, so that students can post their reactions to a class, or share their thoughts about what's working well, what's not working well, or share the reactions to some topic that you're about to address, or just share, any ideas that they want to for brainstorming purposes. Padlet and Miro have a few more features, but again, if you want to use them more, you do have to pay for them, but they do have some additional options. But Jamboard is free, it's built in. Padlet and Miro have free versions, and you can do a lot of basic things with that. And actually, yeah, Jackie mentioned using Slack. Slack can work really well in the classroom. And a lot of people have been using Slack. I know Rebecca's used it in many of her classes, and I think there's some people in political science who've used it, some people in comm studies, I believe, who've used that, and that's worked pretty well. I think we have that listed into a different category, and it is a collaboration tool. Where was that? Yeah, actually, that probably does belong in there too, I suppose. Yeah, so let's just throw that in there. Slack is also a tool. Well, let me just throw in the link. It's used a lot for classroom use, so it probably belongs in here too. There we go. And we've used it for some groups. We've done it with some of the reading groups. We've used Slack for asynchronous conversations. We did that last year with our new faculty as a way, since we had all these new faculty come in last year who, not this the current year, but the year before, the first year of the pandemic, where they didn't even meet many of the colleagues because we started off remote. And so we were using Slack to allow them to communicate with each other, and some of us who've been here a bit longer. And that led to some really good conversations. Questions were posted. A lot of that moved to the Oz Professors Hangout a little bit later, but a lot of it started off right in there. And so Slack is a really good tool. And you can have multiple channels for multiple purposes. If you want to do math equations, that only applies to some. LYX, I don't know how it's pronounced. I think it's LYX, actually. It's a free LaTeX editor. And there's also MathType. It will, eventually this will be working again as we go. Something went wrong. It had been working. We had a workshop on it, and it disappeared from our as we go accounts, and we can no longer turn it on in Windows because CTS had the ability to turn off the ability to add it, and they decided to take advantage of their ability to reduce our productivity. And we're working on getting that restored because it's a really useful tool that was added for accessibility purposes, because things created with that tend to be more accessible than other ways of doing it with images. So that should be coming back. I think someone didn't communicate very well with other people there, and they've had staffing issues, and I'm hoping that gets resolved soon. Mathematical processing, we have a Maple license on campus. Mathematica has a free version, but it's somewhat limited, but there is a website you can use for a lot of mathematical symbolic typing and math type work. This is where we put Slack as an online discussion tool, but it is also for project management. So it does belong in both. You can use a discussion boards in Blackboard. Packback is a wonderful tool, but it's free only for SUNY Online classes. And we have a few of those in the School of Business. It's incredibly expensive for what it does, though. Currently, they're charging $22 per student per course. So if a student was to use it in 5 courses, they'd be paying $110 just to use a discussion board that gives the instructor a little bit less grading. I know it's being used in some School of Business classes, but it's adding a lot of cost to our students for reasons that are not entirely obvious in terms of the cost-benefit ratio. It makes work a little bit easier for instructors, but again, $22 per course can be really expensive. Well, for students who are struggling, that can be a significant barrier. So we don't use it very extensively here, as much as the SUNY system would like us to, because they want to use that tool more. And I think they're hoping they can get a better group rate if more schools buy into the paid version and make our students pay more just for a slightly better discussion board. I guess I'm adding a little editorial comment there, but it's, you know, it's a little troubling to see costs adding up just to make our life a little easier. Online testing, Blackboard's obviously the easiest thing, but a lot of people have been using quizzes in Google Forms. It's a quick, easy way to share some quizzes with automated grading, and it's a pretty easy interface. Self and peer assessment, you can do it in Blackboard with surveys. Google Forms work really well. You could also use whiteboards to do some of those things, or at least for, well, not so much for the self and peer assessment, sorry. For feedback for instructors, you could use those things. But if you want to get feedback from your students, you could use an anonymous survey or set up a Google form and make it anonymous. Or if you're doing group projects, you can have students do it non-anonymously to assess their own work or to assess work in their groups, you know, where they do an evaluation of the other people in the group and just asking them to do it one time for each of the people in their groups. Or you can do that more informally, but, you know, it's used a lot. Polling, there's all sorts of tools out there. We've done a lot of workshops on this. Kahoot is a fun game-like one if you want it to be anonymous. iClicker is a campus one easy way to do it. And right now, it's no cost for faculty or students this semester. I didn't notice this in spring 2022. Whether it continues beyond that will be up to CTS, but currently it's free for faculty and students to use that as a polling tool. And it's a really intuitive polling, has really good polling capabilities, a wide variety of questions, and it's really easy to use. And it can integrate with Blackboard if you want to have graded questions. Zoom works, but you have to set up the questions in advance, and the interface is kind of clunky, and it's just kind of a pain. Socrative works pretty well, and it's free for up to 50 students if we lose access to iClicker. And there's these other tools too that combine polling with presentation software, where they will import Google Slides or PowerPoint slides, or you can create your own within them. And there's built-in polling tools right there where people get a link to a website where they can respond to the polls, or they can download the app in the case of Mentimeter or Nearpod. Poll Everywhere is great, but I think it's free only for classes of up to 15 or maybe 20. Beyond that, in a class my size, it would cost a few $1,000s a year just for my class, let alone anything else. Some campuses have site license for it, and then it's a great tool. But Poll Everywhere is a really nice, flexible tool. But if you have moderately large classes, it's relatively expensive. Quizzes is an alternative that's very similar to Kahoot. I had to switch to that last summer because I was teaching a class at Duke where I had students from China, and Kahoot is blocked by the Great Firewall, and Quizzes is not. So basically, I just had to move any questions I had, create all the questions in Quizzes, and it works very similar, and it's free for up to a certain number of students use. You know, the usual presentation tools, a lot of them overlap with the polling tools. Google Calendar, Google Appointments are commonly used. We did a workshop on that yesterday. You Can Book Me is no longer free for most of its capabilities. Calendly has a basic free version, but you know, Google Calendar, it works really nicely, and all of our students have access to a Google Calendar, and I'd encourage those as possible uses. I'm spending a lot of, I didn't intend to spend too much time talking about it. Screencasting and screen recording is just if you want to do some quick presentations and share them with students. Any of these tools work really nicely. The easiest ones are probably Panopto, Screencast-O-Matic, or Screencastify. They let you create simple videos by just recording your screen. But something that a lot of people don't know is that Mac, Windows, iOS, and recent versions of Android all have free screen recording tools built into the operating systems. On a Mac, if you press the Shift key, the Command key, and the 5, it will start recording anything on the screen using the microphone and camera too. And I'm not sure about the camera, but it will certainly use a microphone and what's being displayed on the screen until you press whatever the key command is to stop it. I think there's a little icon you can press to stop it too. Windows, if you press Windows, Alt, and the capital R key, it will give you a screen recording of anything from that point on. And again, I think you press the escape key to stop it, but it tells you how to stop the recording once you activate it. On iOS, it's one of the things available in that control panel when you swipe down from the top, where you can, well, you may have to enable it there, but once you do, you press a button and you have the option of recording anything on the screen and your voice. So you could demonstrate how to use an app on an iPhone or on an iPad by just starting that screen recording what you want to demonstrate to students. And then again, there's a button you can stop to stop it, and it will save it as an MP4 video, which you can then upload to YouTube or share it in some other way. The same thing works in Android. If you have Android 11 or later, earlier versions of Android tend not to be upgraded or upgradable on many devices, but for the last couple of years at least, certainly the newest Samsung phones and tablets and the newest Google phones and tablets will have those capabilities, or at least those in the last 2, maybe 3 years now. And of course, Zoom is something that a lot of people use to do recordings because while it's not designed for this primarily, everyone's used to the interface now. So, you could choose just to do a session or Zoom session with yourself, talking to yourself, as sometimes we felt when there was just that box of black boxes out there anyway, and then stop the recording and then share the video later. But again, a lot of people use that because they were used to the interface. There's a lot of free or campus license software. I use Gretel in my own class. Minitab, we now have a SUNY contract for it, so you have to go through a more elaborate procedure. Thanks, Jackie. And, we have licenses for SAS and SPSS. R is free, and Stata is something in the economics department we use. I have to mention that because it's the best package out there, but we haven't been able to get it at a campus level because it is, well, it's cheaper than SAS and SPSS, but it's not as widely used outside of most government agencies and research, or people doing research in universities and so on. Some ways of helping students manage their time. The Remind app lets you send text messages to students, and they share their phone numbers with the program and you share yours, but they're not able to text you directly in response to it. So if you want to send a quick reminder to students or a quick announcements, it will go right to their smartphone, which is often going to be read sooner than something going to email or going to an announcement in Blackboard. Blackboard calendars can be set up to serve as reminders. You could also create a class Google Calendar and share that with your students. And Trello, again, is a tool that you can use for project management, which can include time management issues. We've got lots of, good tutorial software available on almost any tech program using LinkedIn Learning or even programming languages. And on YouTube, there's tutorials, materials for everything, including how to fix washing machines or, rebuild the carburetor on your car if you choose. We got some good survey tools. We have Qualtrics available to anyone. There's Blackboard surveys, and I think I put a link to a USC video on how to do them. Google Forms is another good way, and a lot of people use a free SurveyMonkey tool. Team communications, we've got Slack, Google Chat, Discord, and GroupMe are commonly used. And students will use some of these things on their own, and they'll often create their own Discord group or GroupMe groups for classes, sometimes for good, where they're sharing information and assistance, sometimes for issues of academic integrity violations, but that's another issue. If you are in a discipline where you might want to build timelines, there's a free timeline tool, which is commonly used in lots of history classes and others where you want to develop some concept and see how it evolved over time. Students can create this and use them for presentations or use them to build presentations. Video conferencing, the big ones are Zoom, Google Meet, and Microsoft Teams. And we have all those available for free on our campus. We've talked a bit about these already, video recording and editing. The big ones are Adobe Premiere and Camtasia, but actually, the screencasting tools tend to overlap that. Video hosting, we have Ensemble, Panopto, YouTube are the ones that are officially supported on campus. One problem with both Ensemble and Panopto is they're they're at capacity on our campus and they end up getting deleted after some time. YouTube, we were allowed to have unlimited storage so far. And therefore, if you create videos that you want to keep beyond a semester, upload them there, because if you put them in Ensemble Panopto, someone will delete them. And if you remember this fall, there was an announcement that said that all videos from the spring will be deleted by, I think it was December 15th or 31st. It turned out they were all deleted a couple of weeks before that. And in fact, before that announcement even went out, which caused some people to be extremely upset because they went to try to save their videos and they found before the deadline that was announced and they were already gone. So, and I think that may have been done on outside of our campus. I hope it was done outside of our campus and not by the people who manage that for our campus. But it did cause some people to be extremely upset to have lost access to the videos that they had expected to roll over for another semester. If you are working with, if you want students to be able to see things in the rest of the world using Google Cardboard or using, VR headsets, if you happen to have access to those, Google Virtual Tours and Google Expeditions have some nice video recorded in 3 dimensions in virtual reality. So people wearing headsets could go into that space and look around in all directions and visit that area. And there's some great tours of museums, some archaeological sites, some historic sites, and so forth. And wikis, we've got the Blackboard Wiki, which is terribly good, but PB Wiki and PB Works and Wiki EDU are the big ones out there. Okay, so that's that broad list. Now, YouTube. What were you wondering about in terms of YouTube, Bill?
Well, the general... I should be looking this up myself, but the general way that create a channel and also upload to YouTube, you have to have your channel or site or, just a general overview of it.
Okay, we will go to YouTube. And right now I'm logged in as a self account here. And if we go in there, we can click on YouTube Studio, which is what you would use to upload a video. And what you would do to upload a video, if you have it stored on your computer, which is where many things would be stored, or wherever it is, get it to your computer. And then you just click on create and then upload the video. And all you would do there is just click on upload, and you would either search for that file or you would drag it to this box, and then it would just simply upload it. I don't know if I have any on here because I've been cleaning up I've been uploading like 10 or 12 videos every day from the workshops, but I don't have any here. I've deleted them from my Dropbox. So, but what would happen then is it would then get uploaded and it would ask you a few questions. It would ask you if it's intended for children because of the Child Protection Act. And generally for the videos we'll be using in colleges, we generally say no, because they're not designed for younger children, for elementary school age children. And then it would ask you if you have any subtitles or if you want it to generate it automatically. Because we're using Zoom for our workshop, what happens is it automatically generates, well, let me go back a step. All of our workshops are recorded and they're stored in the Zoom cloud. I download the whole package. That package will contain the video file and separate audio file. If you only want to share audio, it will share the chat transcript and it will share the transcript that was generated by the Otto.ai, which is again, the automatic transcription service. So there's 2 of those that we use when we upload a video. We drag the file to here, and then after you say no, that this is not intended for children, one of the next option is subtitles. And it will ask you if the subtitles you're uploading have captions or have timings or not. Because this is a VTT file, it does contain timing issues, which allows it to sync directly from that file. So I select yes with timings, and then I search for that file, which is in the download folder where I downloaded it to, and then it will automatically sync that transcript to the videos. And then at the very end of the process, there's a few more questions that are optional. It'll ask you how you want to share it. And you have the options of sharing things privately where only you could see it, share it with specific people where, where only you could see it, or you could share it with specific individuals if you know their YouTube account, or you could share it. I forgot what the term is. But the next thing basically is it's not publicly visible, but you could share the URL with anyone, and then anyone with the URL would have access to it. So, so that's somewhere in between, something where only people who are specifically allowed can see it, and making it public. So, and the third option is making it public, where it's searchable, where anyone on YouTube could search and find it. All of our workshop videos for the last couple of years, last 3 years now, have been going up as public videos, so anyone can search for them and find them there for anything that we post. And so once you've done that, it will upload the video. Most of the videos take about 5 to 10 minutes to render and become publicly available. And when you get to that stage, let me just look at the content. These are videos I uploaded last night. They're now here. And then I would grab a link to that and get the shareable link and just paste that in our list of videos. The other thing that can happen is, one other thing it asks is if you want to add the video to a playlist. So when you, in the upload process, one of the early questions is, oh yeah, a channel is something well, the channel basically is created for you default when you create it. You can create, I believe, multiple channels, but mostly what people are more likely to do is to create a channel is just your stream of content. And I'm pretty sure, I haven't done it, but you might be able to create multiple channels. You can certainly do it if you have different email accounts, but the channel basically is the stuff that you upload. And I haven't really done much with that. So it's tied to the specific Gmail account. I don't know if you can have, I don't think you can have multiple channels tied to an individual account. I believe, I'm not positive on that. But what people tend to do is create playlists. And we've got several Gmail accounts we've used, but for the spring and fall, we've been using a Celt account. We used to have some issues because YouTube was not officially allowed. So we had an Oswego Celt at Gmail account, because the college was blocking access to Google until a few years ago. And that's where all of our other videos for the last 6 or 7 years were posted. But recently we switched entirely to the college created account, the official college account. And when you add the videos, you don't have to, but you can create playlists around different themes. So for example, in this account, we have one for the spring workshops where we had 42 videos. So far, we have 65 videos loaded for here. And if you, I can edit it to see what's in that playlist, and they're all sorted by either the order of upload, or you can rearrange them. So, and I did that earlier this morning because sometimes they get uploaded out of sequence depending on how long it took them to be uploaded. And because we have a couple of people working on these sessions, and sometimes one person will do it sooner than the other. Or there were 2 cases where people inadvertently displayed some content. In one case, there was a discussion of an academic appeal that popped up on an email screen, and that was edited out before that video was shared publicly. So that ended up being way down the list, but all you need to do is you can just drag it and move. You can just grab it. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry. If you do want to move it somewhere else, all you need to do, if I go back to edit the playlist, is you grab it by those little dots on the side here, I believe, and then you can, no, I'm sorry, on the left by this little handle, and then you can move it up or down to wherever you want it in the list. So you can sort things in whatever order is most appropriate. And here are the workshop videos from these workshops. And so far we're up to number 76 of 82, and we'll have the rest of the 82 here today. We don't have all of them because there were some sessions that were basically Q&A sessions or assistant things for all of our accessibility questions and answers. We didn't record those because they were individuals coming in with very specific questions. And there were a couple of questions where there were sensitive topics dealing with mental health and other issues, or issues where people were talking about some concerns they had about particular students and how to address those. So those were not recorded and are not here. But we have so far, again, 65 out of 76 videos that are here, and the other sessions were, in general, with one exception, were intentionally not recorded. The one session that was left out was one where there was all sorts of technical problems in a session I was giving that simply didn't work because, for among other things, you can no longer edit HTML in Blackboard using Chrome. There's an incompatibility that popped up that I was not aware of, and I suspect anyone at Oswego, well, if anyone at Oswego knew, they did not share that publicly in any way that would have been helpful. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what happened to the HTML editor that I was using to try to put embed code for videos in. So that whole session was just kind of a disaster. So I thought it was best not to upload a video that was likely to confuse people rather than assist them or to deter people from trying something because of that. But by the way, if you do want to edit HTML in any of your pages in Blackboard, just use Firefox. That is still working. So, and that's pretty much it. But if we do want to go in and we can look at any of these videos, let's go back to the well, your movie. No, that's not it. Those are just random things that popped up there, because we don't really use this to look at Ice Age, or at least I certainly haven't. But if we look at YouTube Studio again, go back to that screen. We can go back to content and it will show all the videos we've uploaded. And then if we want to go back in and edit something, we can edit the details here. We could change the name, the description. We could change the thumbnail. So for example, we can assign this as a thumbnail, from ones that it pre-selected. And these are the same questions you're asked when you upload. It says, is it made for kids? And I said, no. You could put in an age restriction if you want to limit the age range or something. I don't really care if young people watch our professional development videos. Then you could edit the subtitles if you want. If the automatic subtitles might be wrong, but these are the ones that were generated. And because this came from a transcript of a Zoom session, it even has the names of the speakers embedded in it as part of that transcript, because it picked that up from the Zoom window. And then you could go in and fix anything there, because some of the words will be wrong, some of the breaks will be wrong, and so forth. And you can just go in and simply edit it by going in and changing it. And then when you're done, you just click done, and there it is. And then it will re-render it with the new, with the changes made. So that's pretty much it. There is an editor tool here. It's not as full featured as you want, but you can add some other elements. You could blur parts of the video if you want. You could add background music. You could adjust the level of the audio. You could add some audio. You could put in an end screen, or you could do some basic editing on the timeline. It looks like basically just the blur part is enabled right now, or you could trim it. So if you don't want to use a video editing software, you could trim off the beginning and the end if something started before you wanted it to, or if someone was a little slow in pressing the stop record button. So you could trim it from either side by just dragging in a little bit, or similarly at the other side, and trim it that way. Most people would tend to do that with video editing software outside of here. But if you just want to do a quick trim at the beginning or the end, you can use a built-in video editor. And I think that's the blur option.
Well, thanks for going over that, John. I've been too lazy to look it up myself, so I appreciate it.
Well, I've had to learn a lot of these things just because we've been using them,
Yeah.
Good. And you can look at analytics. This was just posted yesterday, so we won't really have any analytics here. In fact, well, we do have a couple people who've looked at it so far, it looks like, but not too many yet. Well, we don't have any audio retention yet because it takes time for people first to watch it and for the statistics to be analyzed. We go back to some of the early videos, I think we'll probably see there were a few more viewers. Let's see. My guess is this one. Well, here's one that had 6 viewers so far. So we could take a look at that. And we could look at the analytics. There's not going to be a lot there, but this shows the number of times it was viewed, which is 4 more than average for this set. And the average watch time was about, well, a third of an hour. And I don't remember quite how long the video was. Well, it's 46 minutes. So it looks like only one person. Well, it looks like no one watched the whole thing. But in any case, well, let's see. It doesn't tell you how much was each. This is just the time, the number of views by date.